Welcome to Smart Branding, a podcast dedicated to branding, naming, and domain names. I'm Tatiana Bonneau, and with my guests, we try to help you create and grow strong, memorable, and meaningful brands online. I believe time is one of our most precious assets, and so I want to thank you in advance if you decide to spend the next 30 minutes with us. I promise to do my best to make those worth it. Let's go. So today our guest is Rishabh Dev. He is an entrepreneur, growth marketing and e-commerce consultant, author of 101 Ways to Grow Your Startup, and a founder of two businesses. Thank you for making the time, Rish.
Thanks, Tatiana. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with a bit of background. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to do what you do now.
Sure. So I started off freelancing as a digital marketeer. And this was back when SEO was the only thing in digital marketing. There was no social media to be done. And from there, I evolved to taking up more customers, hiring more people, working with other freelancers, a network of freelancers, in fact. So I transitioned to making my own agency, digital marketing agency in 2012. And I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And recently, I've started my own tech startup, which is a social mobile app for learning. So have been in the social media field for quite a while now, even before it existed, to be honest. So starting with SEO and then transitioning to different disciplines of digital marketing.
And 10 years, that's quite some time. Like you mentioned, you started before everybody started going on social media and all the businesses were focusing and are still focusing huge budgets on that. And I remember I used to have an IT company. I started with programming as well some ages ago. But I remember the time when you had to actually convince people they need a website at all. And now obviously, it's not a question. It's more like what sort of a website, and people are more into like every business almost, regardless of their stage, are using some sort of a CRM, some sort of software. So it's a whole different game. How do you feel has social media changed how businesses do marketing and how they manage their brands?
Sure. So for me, it's always, following where the user goes. So if the user is on social media, then the brand has to be on social media. And I've seen the journey wherein, brands were like, all right, like you said, do we need a website? And then it was like, we do need a website, but it should just talk about the business. And then it was like, we need a website, but it should talk about the customer. So getting closer to the customer. Then it was like, we need a website where users can do something and interact with the website. Then it was like, hey, people now are on mobile. So we need a website that loads on mobile. And then it was like, people are now going social. So we need a business page on social that links back to the website. It's always been a journey wherein the businesses have followed the user, which is the right track to go on. And I often hear some businesses who follow the algorithms. And I tell them, just come back to follow the user, because once you follow the user, you are going to be on track with the algorithms as well. Because whether it's Google, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's LinkedIn, YouTube, whichever channel it is, it just wants to do what the user wants, right? So eventually, if the user appreciates a certain kind of content, it's going to get pushed. You can call it the algorithm, you can call it user behavior, but essentially it's all about following the user. So through that journey, I've seen that how this landscape has changed is essentially when a user goes to a website, the communication is limited to the brands talking about them or the consumer, how they can solve their problems. But now it's other people in the picture, right? So having a social conversation means that it's more important for brands to understand how people are talking to each other about the brand. We always say that, branding is about how people talk about you when you are not there. And that kind of conversation has been coming in the forefront with social media, and brands who were able to adapt to that were the first movers in that space.
Something that you said there when you mentioned when brands discovered that they actually have to be on social media as well. And you had that line just now saying they have to have a social media page that leads back to their website. And I feel that's very important. Obviously, I'll appear as biased since I am working with domain names. So for me, like the importance of domain names is obvious and it's not to everyone. But I had a conversation yesterday with a woman who is specializing in content writing. And we touched on that, which I think is very similar with social media and how people do their marketing, where people end up over focusing on the algorithms and those rules and what should be where and how should it be written and how should it look, instead of actually thinking about the users, the humans. And I mean, how do you feel or what advice would you give entrepreneurs on getting that balance right? So obviously you have to be on social media where your users are, but then in a way, don't you want to own your audience and not be dependent always on, whatever algorithm change or rule, or, I mean, literally like in a day it can change.
Absolutely. I mean, so it's always a compromise between two things, right? And there is also a sweet spot, like a balance, which you can achieve between the two. Now, if you look at the funnel, there is impressions and reach, right, at some point. And then towards the bottom of the funnel, we have conversions. And at somewhere in between, you will have to eventually get the people in your own list, right? And what I feel is like there are, within the different channels that we have, some of them you are much closer to the audience than other channels. So, and it also depends on the level of engagement. So let me give you an example. A simple like on your Facebook page could be farther away from you versus someone who comments on your posts regularly, right? Could be further away from you to someone who is now in your newsletter and opens your email regularly. This is your data. And then eventually you have your CRM, you have your customers who are really close to your brand. You literally have their phone numbers, you have calls with them, you have addresses. So it's a spectrum. For me, it's not that, there is a person who you have the data for, who you own and who another channel owns. For me, it's a huge spectrum. And I want brands to also understand that there are different points on this spectrum. And you also have to consider that, somewhere in the middle of the funnel is in the middle of the spectrum, and that's where that person should be, right? You cannot force every view that you get on a YouTube video to be in your list to also have to buy, right? It's always a funnel, and that's the reason why it's a funnel. So there is a place where each audience member or view or engagement belongs. And not every click deserves a name. And that's what I feel that brands should also realize, that it's okay. I think we have to take it with a pinch of salt that, social media is here to stay. People are going to be on social apps more than they will be on your own website, right? Which is not a bad thing. However, you need to figure out that there is a percentage of those people that you should be having closer to you, that you should be having in your email list, should be having brand conversations with. Within that, you should have segments of people you want to have closer conversations with, and just accept the fact that this is how the funnel and the world of marketing works.
That makes sense. You have 2 brands yourself at the moment that you're working at. Tell me a bit about them.
Sure. So Mapplinks is my digital marketing company, and Mapplinks has 3 business verticals. So it has services wherein we do digital marketing for our clients. It has consulting, where I personally go on consulting calls with clients. And finally, it has the academy, where entrepreneurs and marketeers can learn digital marketing skills. And this has been my main business for the last 10 to 12 years. And recently, I noticed that there is a trend with short videos picking up on Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, is the biggest one. And there are a lot of these videos for entertainment. And I wanted to bring in some educational value to that ecosystem. So I launched Edupops, which is a short video app for learning. So you can learn with short 1-minute videos, just like you would do with a social media app. And that's the second brand that I'm building. And as you've seen, which you also mentioned with names, I've chosen the names very carefully, Mapplinks and Edupops. And there's some that some template that I usually follow when I pick brand names.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because they are quite similar in a way. They're both unique names that you've made up, and they're very descriptive.
Right. So, I have a few rules when it comes to naming my companies. The first one, which is the hardest, is that I should have the .com domain available for the names. not like any other domain names outside of the .com. I know that people have different opinions on this one, but for me personally, I just feel .com is my preferred domain name. And with the names, I think that the most important thing is one, that you have a story. And second, that the name can either tell a story by itself, or at least you can tell a story about the name to your customers or your target audience. And the third and the final thing is that the story should connect with the name to the people. So if there is, basically, if there is a story and there is a connect, then you have a good name. So for me, it's, Mapplinks is all about digital marketing. And if you boil down to the unit economics of digital marketing, it's all about links. It's all about URLs. Like eventually, link is what gets you from one place to another. If your website is your home, you have all of doors like social media, this and that. All your tracking is links. All your sharing is links. It could be a video, it could be audio, it could be text, but eventually, link is the currency of the digital marketing. And
I like that. Yeah.
And building a map of these links is what is the concept that we do with a digital marketing agency. We are essentially building a huge map of links, and that's how I came up with the name Mapplinks. And I added another P for the magic, so it's Mapplinks. So yeah, that's the story behind the first name. And with Edupops, it sounded pretty nice to me. I was looking at different names, and I wanted to make short videos for educational value. So Edu comes from there, and Pops is just, it pops up. It's short, it's quick. And even if you see the name TikTok,
it has that ring. Yeah.
That ring to it. So I have the ring, I have the story. People like the name, when they hear Edupops, short videos for learning, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
So
it absolutely makes sense. I agree. Yeah. I mean, it's literally what you imagine. So, and it's very playful as well. So yeah, I like that.
Right.
And a bit more on Edupops. Is it targeted to a specific audience, age? How does it work? Who can benefit from that?
So I'm quite sure this would appeal a lot to Gen Z and millennials both, considering that, they love bite-sized short content, and also considering the fact that attention spans are lower. So it makes sense for them to be able to consume on the go, as well as, I would say, any busy professionals. So young professionals, entrepreneurs, marketeers, they may not have time to take a long 10-hour course, and they might just want to get a summary. So this is the exact same reason why book summaries are so much more popular now than the original books, because, they're repurposed in different ways. They have many more views. Sometimes if you collectively add the views of a video of book summaries versus a full version of a book, it's going to surpass the book readers. So that's how popular, summaries and short form content is.
And for creators of content, is that like, do you create the content and then people can consume it, or can you have creators on the platform that can share their content in that format?
Absolutely. So we are moving from the first to the second. And initially we were curating content, and, I create a lot of content online. So I have a lot of videos on Edupops. I have friends who have, mega influencers, micro influencers, all of these people who have videos on Edupops. And eventually now we are developing the platform wherein people can come in, create videos, edit them, and post them. That's the next phase of development. So we are still pretty early stage, but this is the progression.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll have a look actually. I mean, and I have kids as well, so it's very, very hard to get them to, like you said, the attention span is a problem. And also I think they're so, like, we kind of grew up with one and the other. For them, I can see that literally the school system is not managing to catch up with providing them with the type of content that now they're used to, because they're sitting looking at a lesson in a book, and like in 10 minutes you can tell they're struggling. They can't do like hours of just reading text on paper, and I don't like that. But I'm like, I mean, what are you going to do? That's where they are, that's the world they're growing up with, and that's how they live. And as a parent, I'm not sure I have like the right solution. So something like what you're doing could well be helpful in that direction.
Right. I mean, the evolution of schooling is a bit slow, in my opinion. So we had school and then we have the digital classroom. We need a school 3.0 now, which is basically like an upgraded version, because even as a school, you are a business, and your user, your target audience, your student is changing, right? So you have to adapt how they are changing. It's the same process.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't go quick enough. But I guess that leaves opportunity for businesses to kind of fill in that space and be of help on that.
And hence the boom in edtech, right? So.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We had a report on that recently. We're analyzing top brands in this space, and we can definitely see that obviously the pandemic also helps, but generally, I think it's a space that we're going to see a lot more innovation in.
Absolutely.
How do you see, we touched a little bit on domains and on naming and your naming process. In terms of domain names, how do you see their, like you've been in the space for quite some time, how do you see their importance change over time?
Right. So one of the bigger trends that I'm noticing is that, so I used to, just to give you a background, I used to buy domains all the time. And this was a hobby of mine. So I would collect domains like, my friends would collect baseball cards or something. So I would like to collect these, domains. And I was back in college, I was just buying domains, and I was seeing, what are the domains that have the right keywords? Okay. And if I have the right keywords, then I can probably sell it to someone who wants to create a business around that keyword. And I see that with smart branding, for example. So that's cool because we have the keyword in the domain, and it's very easy. There are two simple words that people know. People already know those words. They'll always remember this, and it has the flow. This is a great template to start with. Another one I've seen is a great trend. In between, I saw that, there were trends that come in with .ai domains, and that, there are different extensions. But I feel that the, .com is, the preference eventually goes back to .com. So there are these different trends that keep coming in. That's one thing that I have in mind for extensions. I also prefer domains which don't have any hyphens or underscores or whatever. I've seen a lot of domains with a lot of those dashes and hyphens in between, stuffing keywords with hyphens. At some point, it becomes a bit too much. And unique names are really something that if you can have a unique name, wherein you can also build a connection with a brand and be able to tell a story, then you're in a very good position. And that's essentially the same thing that I followed with Mapplinks and Edupops, because I literally own these names, right? And if someone is searching for these keywords, then once I've built a brand, of course, then my .com domain is dominating these names. So I do feel that this is an interesting trend to explore outside of the keyword, which is also another cool way of doing it. And then I also feel that there was in between a trend of having domain names, and then people would get a .com, and then they would get all of the other extensions in order to maintain the branding. And I think that it's become less and less relevant now, as long as you can build, because search engines have become better, algorithms have become better, as long as you can signal to the search engines that you own this domain name and you have enough content, you should be more or less fine. It's hard for someone to just, if I'm running this business for 12 years, I don't have all the extensions. I'm bidding it for Mapplinks, for example.
Yeah.
But I don't assume someone is going to create an extension and then just suddenly get all my clients, So these were like kinds of fears that people used to have. And I had discussions about domain names. And these trends, some trends keep going in and out, but then some things like the fundamentals are here to stay.
I think there's registrars that are kind of playing into that as well, because I get myself some emails sometimes like there's some new extension and they're like, go get your name in that extension before. And the thing is, when you don't have the .com, which is whether we like it or not, it's literally like been there for as long as the internet has been there, and it's a brand of its own. Like people naturally think and go to that as a default. So you're going to be fighting human nature, basically, if you're doing anything else. But if you don't have it, then I see a lot of entrepreneurs do that, where they're like, oh, I don't need the .com. I can't, be bothered, or I don't have the cash to invest in it, or I can't justify it, whatever the reason is. And then they are hopping around trying to buy all the other extensions. But the other way around, once you have the .com, like you mentioned, I don't think it makes much sense to just go around buying random extensions. And generally, I guess my advice would be to our listeners, and see if you agree, would be to just have a domain strategy. Like, don't just leave it to chance or to, your cousin or whoever advised you on whatever. It's a important decision and it's an important thing. And so maybe your business does need to have some country extensions, for example, and that would improve your marketing. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But you have to think about that and not just, go around buying all of it or none of it without any sense.
Right. And I completely agree. I would also like to give an anti-example of a strategy that you should not have.
Go ahead.
One of my friends did this. He found a very good name for his startup. And this name was actually, it sounded pretty nice. And he wanted to get the domain name. So he said he just went on, he just put .com and then he saw it's not available. So what he told me was that I'm going to buy the other extension. And then when I raise funding, then I'm going to get the .com because it costs so much money. And I said, dude, you're never going to be able to do that because by the time you make a brand, by the time you raise funding, the price is going to go up. So he didn't realize the fact that the prices will keep changing, the owners will keep changing, and they will just wait for him to raise funding so that he can then go back. And I've seen other startup entrepreneurs do this as well. They're like, let's just start with .net or .ar, whatever, and then we'll slowly buy the domain. If .com is really expensive, then we'll buy it later once we have the money. I would suggest doing the opposite. Either look for a different name if you don't have the money. If you have the money, buy the .com first. And then you can, if you need something else, you can always buy that.
Absolutely. And I actually wrote an article on that some time ago because I hear that a lot when I talk to people. I don't need the .com. People can find me on Google. I don't need it. And that was the title of my article. Like, you're saying you don't need it, but you're going to end up paying for it and not owning it in the end. Because you are building that brand. People are going to look for that name. People are going to go to that name. So you're not going to pay, 6 figures or whatever for that name. You're going to pay a lot more either for that name later on. And in that case, at least, you're hoping it's going to be available and you're going to have it, or you're going to end up paying for the literally lifetime of your brand to fill in that gap of people that are still going to go there. Losing emails, losing traffic, confusion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have people that write to me about a domain name from a company that has .something. They're writing to me about the .com, and in their email, they put the .com. So they're getting their own email wrong. It's like, that's your company, your email. Like, imagine how many of your clients are doing that all the time.
True. I mean, even browsers, the shortcuts on browsers default to .com, right? So like there's so many ways to actually make that mistake. In fact, since you mentioned that you're not going to pay 6 figures, I actually have a client of mine who did pay 6 figures to get a .com domain name eventually because it started a .us domain name, considering that their target audience was mostly US. And I was consulting them on their eCommerce. So we scaled their, online store to like 7 figures. And then we said, we've sold to everyone in the US. So what do you want to do now? Right? Like, we want to go to Europe. We want to go to Canada. You need to buy all of those domain names. And he said, doesn't it make sense? I need the .com domain name because I really need it. And I said, yeah, let's get it. Finally, it was like 6 figures. And we had to get the .com domain name eventually. So if there was some scope before starting the store, he could have just modified the name a little bit and got a .com domain name, saved 6 figures. And, e-commerce margins are not that crazy high. So the money comes from the business, but at the same time, you could have saved a lot of money by doing that, by spending a little bit more.
Yeah. Like we said earlier, in all cases, people shouldn't just think, just anything will do. It just has to be thought through. It has to be serious. It has to be, you should consult with people whose job it is, just like you do with a lot of other things. Like, you don't just go, I'm going to just do my taxes myself because I know how to do that. And then you're like, oops. Last thing, where can people reach you?
Great. So LinkedIn is one of the channels that I'm most active on. My name is Rish Dev. Rish is my nickname there. So you can find me on LinkedIn. YouTube is another one. So people can go on my channel. It's called Mapplinks. That's the YouTube channel. I think those are the places where I'm most active on. I've recently started tweeting, but not very aggressively.
Good. All right. Well, that's been a pleasure. Thank you again for making the time. And have a good day.
Same here. You too. Take care.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of Smart Branding Podcast. Feel free to visit smartbranding.com for more information and reach out if you have any suggestions, questions, ideas, or just want to learn more about how a good domain name strategy can help you build a strong and successful brand. See you next time.